What up, Wizards? It's Deb the Humanoid. Now with Animal Companion, we're from Mtg, we like it of Magic. And of all decks, the patrons have picked Orzhov Humans to tech today. And there may be a few reasons for that, right? In Strixhaven, we got a whole bunch of new, really good humans. No one's talking about the humans deck. Someone should do that. I want to do it, so there's that. But on the other hand, it could be deeper than that. Why do we as Magic players like the creature type human so much? Do we just want to root for the home team? Is it that shallow? Or could it possibly be that in a fantasy game that has dragons and demons and trolls, we still believe that through the collective conscious, the indomitable human spirit, that together we can accomplish anything? You don't care about this. You just want to see the deck. Let's go.
I'm sorting through some heinous haters like a pooper scooper. I'm just trying to take my life like a Koopa Trooper. I'm double Mario. That means I'm super. And I'm freaking dangerous like a Chupa Cabre. Got them all day like a Kanye, but I'm way better getting cheddar in Monterey. But Jack, you don't know, man. You got the show, man. You want roast beef? Well, I'm Arby's.
And we're back. Like and subscribe. That's it. I'm not going to waste too much of your time on a call to action at the beginning of the video. They tell you you're supposed to do that, but as a YouTube viewer, it seems really irritating to me. So I'm going to respect you. Just do the YouTube stuff, please. But aside from that, I guess I should start this one by taking you back to Ikoria. Y'all remember Ikoria? Feels like forever ago now. You probably just remember Ikoria is the one with the companions. And it also had the ultimatums. Ikoria was a really powerful set in retrospect. When you think about it. It wasn't just the mutate mechanic and companions, but a card that Ikoria did have that I was really excited about. I was going to say we were all excited about it, but I think it may have just been me that ended up falling through the cracks, was Lisa Kudro of Drannith. Now, to this point, old Dran Drescher here hasn't really done diddle squoots in this format because there are so few good playable humans in this color combination that it's still not worth playing a 3-mana Anthem effect with removal stapled onto it and the ability to manipulate graveyards. All of that stuff is really good and honestly works particularly well in this format. The ability to get stuff out of an opponent's graveyard, shame you can't touch your graveyard with it to kind of keep down the amount of cards in your yard against rogues. That kind of sucks, but you can hit your opponent's yard with it. And there are plenty of ways to hit escapable cards or creatures they might reanimate or whatever. So just a fantastic ability on this card. And it also can wipe out Yorions and Lovestruck Beasts and everything in between. And even bigger than that, so long as you've got a couple of other humans laying around. So just everything the card does is amazing, but it really hasn't been worth it up to now to prioritize humans. But then Strixhaven hit the streets and just changed everything, at least as far as this deck is concerned. I think this is a rock that not enough people have overturned and really looked at in this format, because so far in testing this deck, I've had some really good success, and a lot of it is due to the new cards that we've gotten, like Elite Spellbinder, Blade Historian, and of course, Silverquill Silencer. In this deck, Blade Historian kind of works the same way that a Torbrand does in mono red, right? You play it on turn 4, you hope, and then your creatures are doing way more damage, and if your opponent wasn't prepared for that, it can cause massive problems, and often will just win the game for you. But Spellbinder and Silencer are just as integral to the deck as Historian, if not more, because these two allow you to play a tempo game where you couldn't really get away with that beforehand, right? Before Strixhaven came out, you could play Orzhov Humans, but it's really just an aggro deck that's not as good as the other aggro decks, doesn't have the synergy that it needs, doesn't really do much besides play a good human at every spot on the curve, or at least the best human you can find at every spot on the curve. Well, with this deck, you're still doing that, right? Because Silencer and Spellbinder are two of the best humans at their respective spots on the curve, but you're also getting to play this game where you can tempo out your opponent a little bit, right? With Spellbinder, you can back up that extinction event or that sweeper or whatever by a couple of turns at the very least. And with Silencer, you can punish them sometimes in a way that you lock them out of even playing a card. So I like the way these two work together, right? There's some games where you know what you're playing against, so it's okay to go Silencer into Spellbinder. And then there's other games where we go Spellbinder into Silencer after we've already seen their hands. So these two work really well in combination, both on curve and off curve. Just everything these two cards does is incredible for a deck like this and really changes the face of how the deck plays in the first place. Really, though, I cannot stress enough how much the inclusion of these 3 new cards from Strixhaven elevated this deck's game plan to this huge extent. You know, not many existing decks in this format got 3 whole new cards from Strixhaven, much less cards this important, which is why I think it's a good idea to reevaluate the Humans deck right now. These 3 cards I've just talked about are probably 3 of the best cards this deck could have imagined getting. But now, that's not to say that we didn't already have some good humans in the human pile in Standard. We actually had some really, really good ones. Cards that are actually extremely important to existing decks already, right? We have 4 Luminarch Aspirant in here, along with 4 Seasoned Hallowblade and 4 Giant Killer. Now, Giant Killer is actually the only 1-drop in this deck. That might surprise you, but we really don't have a whole lot of other great options for 1-drop humans in either white or black. I wanted to play an 8 to 10 1-drop, Humiliate deck, but in the end, I'm just playing the 4 1-drops. Humiliate got cut, so it's just not that same sort of Orzhov tempo deck that we've been seeing so far this season. In this deck, I think we keep it relatively low on the 1-drops, but Giant Killer is easily the best 1-drop human in the format. It may actually, you might be able to argue that Giant Killer is one of the better 1-drops in the format. Period. This helps kill those big creatures like Yorion and Lovestruck Beast and all kinds of other stuff. Elder Gargaroth is floating around. Vorinclex. No end to the huge creatures people are playing right now. So Giant Killer is good for that. But if you want to play it as a 1-drop, feel free to, especially if you're trying to curve into a General Kudro or a Blade Historian or something like that. It's often worth playing it on turn 1. And honestly, it's a great mana sink too. Sometimes you got a flyer or two, or you just want to get through for that last few points of damage. One of our biggest concerns is cards like Lovestruck Beast, cheap creatures with huge bodies, and Giant Killer is great against them whether it's in our hand or on the table. And I probably shouldn't have to tell you that Luminarch Aspirant and Seasoned Hallowblade were really very good cards. These in some ways form the basis of the existing mono-white aggro deck in Standard that's been kind of a scourge for a while, whether you're in best of 1 or best of 3. You're going to be playing against some mono-white, and it's largely because these 2 cards are so freaking good. And porting them over from that deck makes a lot of sense. They're both humans, and these are probably 2 of the best 2-drops in the format, period, regardless of color or set or whatever. So, Luminarch Aspirant making our creatures bigger is very, very important. I shouldn't have to tell you, this helps win stalemates. Getting multiple copies of them in the same game is unbelievable. Luminarch Aspirant, probably one of the most important white creatures in the entire format. Possibly one of the most important white creatures in years, actually. So we'll absolutely play this. But Seasoned Hallowblade, great too, because we're going to be facing down sweepers and removal, no matter how many Elite Spellbinders or Silverquill Silencers we get, right? Even if we do silence them, they can still play the Heartless Act we named. They can still play the Stomp we named. It's just going to cost them some life in a card. With Spellbinder, we grab the Doomscar out of their hand or something. They can still cast it later. It's not that big of a deal. But, with things like Seasoned Hallowblade, we can really play around a lot of removal, get through, damage pretty easily. A lot of people just won't block a Seasoned Hallowblade if it's going to kill the creature they block with. So just a fantastic creature. Again, just one of the best 2-drops in Standard, period. No matter what you're talking about. But since we're playing humans, we should probably play these 2 cards. I'm also running 4 copies of Dire Tactics in this deck. We don't have too much room for a whole lot of non-creature stuff. We really want to hit on the human synergy as much as possible, but this is human synergy, right? Even when you don't have a human out, for whatever reason, you just got hit by a sweeper, and then your opponent followed up with Yorion before you could play a creature. It's probably still worth playing that Dire Tactics, In a lot of matchups, your life total just doesn't really matter, at all. Like the Emergent Ultimatum matchup, you don't really care too much about your life total, so if you have to kill that Yorion, you do it. Even if you got to take 5 for it or whatever, but for the most part, you're going to have a human out. And if you have even 1 creature out, it's pretty much guaranteed to be a human. So unless something really weird happened. But to finish off the main deck, already, it seemed really fast this time around, we're going to play 4 copies of Rally the Ranks. Just a 2-mana Anthem effect that's really hard for your opponent to do anything about. And that's kind of one of the best things about the card, is that your opponent can sweep your board, but as long as you can rebuild with a creature or 2, they're probably going to be somewhat sizable just because you have this card out. And that +1/+1 means a world of difference. You'd be surprised just how much turning Giant Killer from a 1/2 into a 2/3 matters. Having this down when you play Silverquill Silencer means it can't be killed by a Stomp. That's important. Having this down when you have a Seasoned Hallowblade out means your opponent can't trade a 1/1 with a Seasoned Hallowblade or force you to discard a card, right? So there's a lot of reasons that the +1/+1 matters, but the card can be a little awkward. Some games you'll go no 1-drop, Rally the Ranks, and it's kind of taking you a while to get started up. You're sputtering at that point, especially if you're on the draw. You're going to have a hard time racing a lot of decks, even decks like Emergent Ultimatum. You better have some good stuff after that turn 2. So the card can be a little awkward, even when you go turn 2 Rally into turn 3 Kudro, right? So I'm not 100% sure the card belongs in the deck, but it has saved my skin in a bunch of different situations. And as a matter of fact, in the example game that I'll show you a little bit later, I'm not sure we could have pulled that game off without Rally. So I have come to like this card, but it is one of the cards that I think could be cut. Let me know what you think. Now here are the lands. There are 24 of them, which seems like a lot, but I do want 14 basics for Shine, Shadow, Snarl. You can probably get away with playing like 12 basics for Shine, Shadow, Snarl, but I like 14, just personally. But for a second, back to the high land count. This is more important than you might think. We do have mana sinks in this deck, like Giant Killer and General Kudro, and there's going to be plenty of turns where you want to double spell on turn 5 or 6 and effectively use all of your mana, right? You want to play a 2-drop and a 1-drop and still have mana to Giant Killer. So you need a little bit more mana in this deck than you might think at first glance, so I think 24 is correct. But here's your sideboard right here, and there's probably some cards in here you expected to see in the main deck, but I felt like we're a little too specialized, you know. Tranet's Magistrate is a pretty good example of that. I really don't want this in the main deck, but when we do come up against, say, Adventures, it's a good card, and it works really well in combination with Elite Spellbinder, because if you spellbind something and put it into exile, suddenly they can never play it so long as you have a Magistrate out. Spellbinder's cool like that in a couple of ways, right? Like if you get a Lovestruck Beast out of their hand, they can't play the Heart's Desire half. If you get a Bone Crusher Giant out of their hand, they can't play the Stomp half. So there's some really cool things about Spellbinder, and it combines with Magistrate in a really cool way, but I still don't think Magistrate is worth it in the main. Kitesail Freebooter is in there, again, over Humiliate for a few reasons. Again, we're not playing enough 1-drops, I think, to play Humiliate, and Humiliate is a card that I really, really like. I've been playing Orzhov Tempo for a while now. That deck does play 10 1-drops, and in that deck, Humiliate is a boss, but in this deck, I'd rather play towards the human theme a little bit more. That influenced my decision. I like that this card has evasion. I like that it combines well with an Elite Spellbinder, right? Or it combines well with Silverquill Silencer as well. Being able to go into their hand on turn 2 and then be able to either play Silencer, knowing what their hand is, or play Elite Spellbinder and go into their hand again on turn 3 is really good tempo and should keep your opponent off of being able to play too many removal spells too. So there's a lot that I like about Freebooter. The evasion matters, the body matters, the creature type matters, and in this deck, I want to play it over Humiliate in the board. But there's also Sigrid, God Favored, one of the most important cards in the entire board. We'll actually bring this in against other creature-based decks, but I felt like I was getting too many matchups where this didn't matter as much as I wanted it to when it was in the main deck. You know, it's not very good against Yorion decks. It's not actually as good against rogues as I would have wanted it to be, although you'll still catch me siding against rogues a lot. But where this does matter is in the mono white and mono red matchups, especially the mono white matchup, because you can catch like a Seasoned Hallowblade, or you can play through their Selfless Savior with this card. So, and it's really hard for them to get rid of it if they don't have like a Skyclave Apparition or something on them at the moment. So this is just a dream card in the mono white matchup that helps us win a lot of those games. But we're also playing 2 Generals Enforcer in games where we're putting in Sigrid. Well, suddenly we have 4 General Kudros and 3 Sigrids. Well, that's a bunch of human legends, so Generals Enforcer can go in, whereas I don't actually think it's as good of a 2-drop as I want it to be in the main deck, right? In the 2-drop, Aspirant's a better card. Seasoned Hellblade's a better card. Silverquill Silencer, yeah, that's a better card too. So I just don't want to play 16 2-drop creatures. We don't have the room to do it. But when we do put in the Sigrids against aggro, we suddenly have enough, creatures to do it. And when we're up against aggro, I really don't mind having a 3 toughness 2-drop that plays around Stomp and stuff. So, and again, this also helps us, grind out late game matchups against aggro because we have a creature factory. There's a lot of good things about General's Enforcer, but I didn't feel like it was good enough until Sigrid gets put in the deck, and that doesn't happen enough until games 2 or 3. There's also a pair of Basri's Lieutenant. When we come up against decks that play destroy-based sweepers like Doomscar, Shatter the Sky, and all kinds of other stuff, really, Basri's Lieutenant can come in and make sure that we can maintain some board presence. This is also pretty decent in aggro matchups, by the way. We're playing against mono red, mono white. Basri's Lieutenant can be a fantastic card for just making sure that we get the better of combat interactions and stuff like that. But finally, we finish off with 1 Elspeth Sun's Nemesis. Fantastic card for the deck, but I don't think it actually goes in the main. I really don't, but well, again, we need to grind out matches when we're up against decks that play a lot of sweepers, a lot of ways of putting cards into our graveyard, killing our creatures, whatever. Elspeth can be a great way to help grind those games out. It's a creature factory that can also make our creatures bigger too. It's escapable, so it helps win long games. There's a lot I like about Elspeth, but again, I don't think we have a slot for it in the main. And here are your power rankings. Final score of 67. That's not too bad. And honestly, I don't even know that this is the best black-white aggro deck in the format, but I do like the human synergy. I like being able to get some mileage out of General Kudro and Dire Tactics. You know, there's more than one reason to play humans in this format right now, and it turns out that pretty much every human in the deck is really, really good. Like, we're not playing a bad card in this deck, aside from, ironically, maybe General Kudro. But Kudro is made way, way better when you've got a whole army, you know, an entire militia full of incredible humans, and we do. Kind of amazing all the different angles this deck is attacking the meta from right now, and no one's paying any attention to it. Just like your Orzhov aggro decks in the format right now, just like your mono white aggro decks. Sometimes it's really difficult to pilot, especially for an aggro deck, because you're trying to do more than just get in for 20, right? Generating tempo is very important to this deck. There's a lot of like big decisions you have to make, from what to name with Silencer, especially on the play on turn 2. It sometimes can be a guessing game, to, you know, knowing what to take with a Spellbinder. A lot of important decisions, so the deck can be relatively difficult to pilot, and you gotta juice every last point of damage you can to guarantee wins sometimes, and that can be tough. So I'm not saying it's the easiest deck in the world, and I don't even know if it's the best aggro deck in the format, but what I will say is that it got a whole bunch of new cards, and the humans, you know, synergies benefit it to a great deal, or at least more than they did if you were trying to play this deck a few months ago, you know? Like, just the ability of General Kudro to give an anthem to our creatures, and then Blade Historian to give our creatures double strike, just that little tiny thing is massive, especially considering they play on curve with one another. So there's a lot this deck has now that it didn't have a few months ago, the best of which is probably being able to actually out-tempo an opponent. You couldn't do that before. You were just kind of like winging a prayer, hoping to play good creatures. General Kudro, I win stats win, right? It never worked. Now it's a lot easier to make your opponent stumble, get on their back foot, put them off their tempo, and actually close games, which this deck has always had an issue with, but not anymore. As a matter of fact, I'll show you an example game here where we play against a 4-color Yorion deck, and we have to make some interesting decisions. And I honestly don't even know if every decision that I made was right? We had to not take an Eliminate so that we could take an Extinction event with an Elite Spellbinder. I also opted to go Spellbinder into Silencer rather than the other way around this game. But in the end, we are able to, again, make sure that their tempo is wrecked just enough to get through with our creatures and actually close the game out with a Blade Historian on the table. Also, important decision here to close out the game, so I wanted to get back on the mic for it. Into the game here, we play Rally the Ranks into Giant Killer. That way, even though they now have the mana to play the Extinction event, even if they do name even, we still have the damage on board to kill them with 2 Giant Killers in a Rally the Ranks. See, I really like that game as an example, because it really showcases all the things I've been trying to tell you the deck does for the last 20 minutes, you know? It shows off all 3 new cards we got from Strixhaven, and shows the deck's ability to out-tempo an opponent and close a game like better than it could just a couple of months ago when I was trying to play the stinking thing. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you get a chance to play it. In paper, it's actually a relatively cheap deck, not really a budget deck, but for all the rares and mythics that are in it, the deck could cost a whole lot more, so it's not too hard to get your hands on. If you're interested in it, check the first link in the description. Go over to TCG Player, because that is where you're going to get the deck for the cheapest. You can check out the list there, but aside from that, I guess I'm going to do the call to action now. It's the end of the video, right? Don't click away. Don't click away for once. Don't click away from the call for action. Like and subscribe. Hit the bell for the notifications. I know a lot of you that watch my channel aren't subbed. So even if you're the kind of person that like never subs to YouTube channels, it would mean a great deal to your dude if you would just sub this to this one channel. If I was like your one sub, that would mean a lot to me. Aside from that, if you really want to help out around here, you can check out the Patreon. Link in the description. $1 a month to vote on content. That's why you're seeing this. And honestly, I think this deck only won the Patreon poll by like 2 votes. So they're always really close. If you want to affect that vote, affect YouTube history, then check the link in the description. Throw me $1 a month. I think I'm worth it, honestly. But aside from that, you can watch me play Magic at twitch.tv/SBMTGdev, or just hit the links in the description and follow me. And that way, whenever I do Twitch streams, you'll just be notified that I'm streaming, so you can just come right on. It's free to follow on Twitch. Don't be afraid of the platform. It's a good platform. I was afraid of Twitch. I didn't know that. I was an old man. I was like, what is this Twitch? I don't know what's Twatch. So don't be afraid of the platform. It's a perfectly good platform. Just hit the link, follow me, check me out when I live stream. We have a lot of fun over there. But so what's up, Strictly Squad? What's up, Stream Crew? I see you. I see y'all. But anyway, that's it for this one. Again, I hope y'all liked it because honestly, it was a better deck than I thought it was going to be when I put it together. I was just like, humans again. It's always bad. But then, like, pleasantly surprised. Give this deck a shot. It's not too bad. But aside from that, I guess I'm done for this one. So it's your turn. Just go to the sideboard down there, the little comments section, and let me know how you felt about it. What would you put in instead of Rally the Ranks? What would you put in instead of any of this? Maybe we come off a copy of General Kudro in the main deck? I wouldn't do it, but if you wanted to, if you were able to free up one slot in the deck, what would you put in? Just what are your thoughts? Let me know, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.